Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. I never imagined that one verse could feel like it was written with my name in it. For years, I walked beneath the crushing weight of expectations, titles, and the silent belief that my worth depended on how well I could pretend to be someone I wasn't. My name is Miriam Salas, and this is the story of how I went from being worshipped for something I didn't understand to being loved for exactly who I am. It's not a tale of perfection. It's a confession of brokenness, of masks that cracked, of a heart that finally dared to be seen. As you listen, I invite you to see yourself between my words, to remember that sometimes the path to freedom begins not with strength, but with surrender. If you have ever felt tired of pretending, stay with me until the end, because what I found is not just my story. It could be yours too. I was 11 years old when the first person knelt before me. The air was heavy with incense and my feet were bare against the cool stone floor. A woman, twice my age and trembling, touched my toes as though they were holy. She whispered something I didn't fully understand. "You carry the divine." I froze. My eyes searched for my mother, unsure if I should step back or say something. She simply smiled, guiding my small hands over the woman's head in what she called a blessing. I didn't know what that meant, but I obeyed. And that moment, though I didn't realize it then, became the first crack in the simple, unguarded life I once knew. From that day forward, I was no longer just Miriam. I was something else, someone else, a symbol, a vessel, a promise people wanted to believe in. The elders in our village began to speak about me in ways that felt distant from the girl I knew myself to be. They said my presence calmed storms, that my voice carried ancient wisdom, that the gods themselves had chosen my body as their dwelling. At first, I tried to believe them. I told myself that maybe this was my destiny, that perhaps my heartbeat was different for a reason. But when I looked in the mirror hidden behind the sanctuary, I didn't see a goddess. I saw a child pretending to know the answers adults were desperate to hear. They built me a small hut of woven palm and straw, calling it my private temple. Each morning, I lit oil lamps and sang chants I had memorized. Each night, I bathed in water they called sacred, whispering mantras into the dark. People came from distant places, seeking my touch, my words, my silence. And I gave it all, without understanding what I was truly offering. In the beginning, it felt important. It felt like I mattered in a way I never had before. I clung to the stories people told after leaving my hut, how their pain eased, how their hearts felt lighter, how their children slept through the night. Yet somewhere deep inside, a question began to grow. Was it really me? Or was I simply saying the things they needed to hear, performing a role passed down by tradition, written in the stars before I was even born? I never dared to voice these doubts aloud. Holy women don't doubt, I told myself. Holy women don't wonder. Holy women know. But I didn't know. I wasn't holy. I was only good at pretending to be. The more people believed in me, the less I believed in myself. I would sit for hours with incense burning beside me, surrounded by garlands and gifts, yet feel utterly alone. The solitude was worse than the pressure. It was the kind of silence that speaks back to you, that echoes your fears louder than your prayers. I prayed for peace, but my prayers felt like they vanished into the ceiling. I sang sacred songs, but they tasted like dust. My body moved through the rituals like clockwork, but my soul wandered far from them. I began to feel like an imposter in my own skin. My smile became part of the costume. My voice carried the cadence they expected, but inside, I was shrinking. And though no one could see it, the weight of being chosen was slowly eroding the person I truly was. The girl who once loved to sit by the river at dawn and watch the mist lift with the sun was fading with every bowed head, every whispered plea, every pair of expectant eyes. Looking back, I can see that was the start of my unraveling. Not the day I left the temple, not the moment I picked up the Bible for the first time, but that day at 11, when I was first called something I could never live up to. It was the day my life began to split in two, the Miriam they saw and the Miriam I really was. And for many years, I thought the only way to survive was to keep those two worlds apart. But as you'll soon hear, walls built to protect can also become prisons. The days turned into years, and the role wrapped itself tighter around me like a garment I could never remove. I learned the exact tilt of my head that made people believe I was listening to the divine. I perfected the pauses between my words so they would seem weighty and mysterious. I could bless a newborn with one hand while calming a grieving mother with the other, all without betraying the emptiness inside. There were moments when I almost convinced myself it was real, that perhaps this was my calling after all. But the truth had a way of haunting me in the quiet hours, when the candles burned low and no one was watching. I would stare at my hands people said could heal, and wonder why they couldn't touch my own aching heart. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night with my chest tight, unable to breathe under the weight of what I had become. I would slip outside to the edge of the river, the place that once felt like home. The water moved without hurry, free and unobserved. I envied it. The river did not have a name to protect or a role to perform. It simply was. Standing there in the cool air, I would feel a longing so deep it made my knees weak. Not for adoration, not for titles, but for the simplicity of being unseen and unmeasured. But dawn would always come, and with it, the duties I could not escape. I remember one afternoon when a young girl was brought to me, her eyes swollen from crying. She knelt before me, clutching her stomach, whispering prayers for the life inside her. I placed my hand gently on her head and spoke the words I'd been taught to speak. Her face brightened as if I had already answered her plea. That night, I could not sleep. I lay on my mat, staring into the dark, haunted by the thought that my blessing might have been nothing more than breath in the air. The thought repeated in my mind like a chant. What if I am not who they think I am? What if all of this is a lie? Those questions burrowed deeper with each passing month, yet I kept them locked inside. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I accepted the offerings with the practiced humility they expected. I performed the rituals with precision, but the gap between my actions and my soul widened until it felt like I was living in two separate worlds. One belonged to the people, to their hopes and their faith in me. The other was a shadowed place where doubt whispered in my ear and guilt tightened around my throat like a rope. I wasn't angry at the villagers. I wasn't even angry at the traditions that had shaped me. I was angry at myself for not being strong enough to keep believing, for letting the questions grow instead of crushing them. I wondered if there was something broken inside me, something unholy that made me unfit for the role I had been given. And yet, no matter how hard I tried to silence the doubts, they seemed to grow louder, as if the very act of suppression gave them power. I wish I could say I left the role the moment I realized I was tired. I wish I could tell you I chose freedom the instant the burden became too heavy, but I didn't. I stayed. I kept playing the part because I didn't know how to stop, because I feared what would remain if I stripped away the robes and the chants. Without the title, without the reverence, who would I be? That question terrified me more than the loneliness, more than the doubt. And so I chose the familiar prison over the uncertainty of freedom. But masks, no matter how carefully crafted, eventually begin to crack. The breaking point didn't arrive with thunder or fire. It came quietly, like a whisper that can no longer be ignored. And it started with the one person I loved more than anyone else in the world. It began with a fever. My younger brother, Daniel, had fallen ill before, but this time was different. The heat in his body refused to fade, and I watched helplessly as his strength slipped away day by day. I did what I had always done. I laid my hands on his forehead. I whispered the sacred words. I burned the incense until my eyes stung, but nothing worked. His condition worsened, and with every failed attempt, panic grew inside me. Not only fear of losing him, but fear of being exposed. If I couldn't save my own brother, what did that say about the years I had spent as the so-called chosen one? The villagers suggested bringing the elders, but I felt an unshakable pull toward something different, something forbidden. A mile away stood a small mission run by a group I had been taught to keep at a distance. It was desperation that pushed me to send for them. A storm raged that evening when a woman named Sister Grace arrived, her white uniform soaked through, her eyes steady and kind. She didn't chant. She didn't bow. She simply examined my brother, took his temperature, and administered medicine with calm precision. I watched in silence, unsettled by how much hope her quiet competence stirred in me. That night, I felt both relief and shame. Relief that Daniel was in good hands, and shame that those hands were not mine. When his fever finally broke, it was not because of my rituals. It was because of her care. Before leaving, Sister Grace handed me a small book wrapped in cloth. "This brought me peace when I needed it most," she said. It was a Bible. I hid it under my mat, afraid of what it might represent, yet unable to forget the way she had looked at my brother, not as a symbol or a problem to solve, but as a person. That night I dreamed of a man in white standing by the river. He said only one word, "Come." I awoke with my heart pounding, my breath sharp in my chest. I reached under my mat and pulled out the Bible. The words inside felt both strange and familiar, but one verse caught me and wouldn't let go. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I read it again and again until the letters seemed to wrap themselves around my bones. I was weary. I was burdened. And for the first time in years, it felt like someone was speaking to the part of me I kept hidden from the world. I didn't know what to believe yet. I didn't know if I could trust this book, this name, this invitation, but I knew I was tired of pretending. In the early mornings, I began to read by the river, the Bible hidden beneath my shawl. Each verse felt like a whisper to my soul. No demands, no threats, just presence, just truth. You are not alone. You are loved. You are mine. I didn't know what to do with that love. I had spent years earning reverence, and here was a grace that required only trust. It terrified me, but I kept returning. I carried on with my public role as though nothing had changed. I still performed the morning rituals, still accepted the offerings, still spoke the blessings with practiced precision. But inside, something had shifted. The chants tasted hollow. The mantras echoed against the verses I had read the night before. During ceremonies, my mind wandered back to the riverside, to the quiet, to the words that seemed to hold more life than all the incense I had burned in my years of service. It became harder to keep the two worlds separate. I began to feel the strain of the double life, a life built on tradition, expectation, and fear in public, and another in private, fragile, and rooted in the whisper of hope. The tension came to a head when one of the elders brought his sick son to me. I placed my hand on the boy's head, closed my eyes, and began to chant. But in my heart, another voice was speaking. "I am the way, the truth, and the life." My voice faltered. My heart raced. I opened my eyes to find the Father still waiting, full of expectation. And in that moment, I felt like a fraud. That night, I sat on my mat with the Bible open on my lap. The words came out before I could stop them. "Jesus, help me." It wasn't a declaration. It was surrender. That night, the dream returned. Only this time, the man in white was closer, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Compassion. He didn't accuse me. He didn't demand anything. He simply said, "Follow me." I woke up crying, not from fear, but because for the first time I felt seen, not as a vessel, not as a savior, but as a person. The next morning I went to the river and let the tears fall freely. I didn't light a lamp. I didn't chant. I just sat there with the Bible in my lap, breathing in the stillness. I knew then that I couldn't walk both paths forever. The choice wasn't clear, but the desperation was. And deep down I knew the role I had been carrying was never meant to be my salvation. It was time to let go, but I had no idea yet what that would truly cost. The festival arrived sooner than I expected. A bright, noisy celebration filled with colors, drums, and dancing. It should have been a day of honor for me. Instead, it felt like an execution of my spirit. I stood at the center as I always had, adorned, revered, watched by every eye. But the joy around me could not mask the stillness inside my chest. My hands trembled with each blessing I gave. My smile felt like a mask stretched too tightly. And though people laughed and sang around me, I had never felt more alone. That night, after the music faded, one of the elders approached me. His voice was calm but sharp. "Your spirit is weak. You must purify yourself." The words didn't wound me. They confirmed what I already knew. I nodded outwardly, but inside I was screaming, not at him, but at myself for staying silent for so long. That night, I opened the Bible to a verse Sister Grace had mentioned when she treated Daniel. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." The words struck me like a flood. I broke. I wept until my throat burned, not from pain but from release. My identity as the holy woman was crumbling, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to let it fall apart. I no longer feared losing my title. I feared living one more day in a lie. The next morning, before the sun rose, I walked away from the temple and toward the mission. Sister Grace met me at the door with no questions, only open arms. She led me to a small room with nothing but a thin mattress and a window overlooking the river. There was silence, the kind I used to fear, but now it felt like the first deep breath after years of suffocation. That night, the chants of the village were replaced by the whisper of leaves and the low rumble of distant thunder. I missed the rhythm of the temple, the false certainty it offered, and I missed my brother. But more than anything, I felt a fragile hope beginning to take root. In the days that followed, I worked in simple tasks, sweeping, cooking, folding laundry. No one bowed. No one asked for blessings. I was simply Miriam. At first, it felt like dying to my status, my influence, my perceived worth. But slowly, something unexpected grew in its place. Peace. It was unfamiliar, delicate, but undeniably real. The first time I handed food to a hungry man, he looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you, sister." Just 2 words, but they pierced through every wall I had built. For the first time in years, someone saw me not as divine, but as human. And that was enough. The weeks passed, and the mission's rhythm began to weave itself into my bones. I woke not with dread, but with purpose. The smallest acts, serving food, organizing supplies, cleaning windows, became sacred in their simplicity. For the first time, I wasn't performing. I was simply being. Sister Grace introduced me to members of the local church. They didn't ask for my past. They didn't demand my story to prove my worth. But something in me needed to tell it, not to reclaim a reputation, but to set it free, to let the shame and fear breathe, and finally die. One evening, a pastor named David spoke at a small gathering behind the mission. He read from the gospel, "Go and make disciples of all nations." The words stayed with me long after the candles burned out. Could it be that I still had a purpose? Was there room in God's plan for someone who had lived so deeply in deception? The question followed me like a shadow, but I kept reading, kept praying. I began to see Jesus not as a distant figure, but as one who walked with me through my shame, who knew my name even when I wanted to forget it. He didn't demand perfection. He offered presence. That alone began to change everything. It was during this quiet season of learning to simply be that she arrived. Her name was Asha, 16 years old, bruised and visibly pregnant. Her family had cast her out. The village wanted nothing to do with her. She had heard whispers of the mission through a fisherman and came barefoot, silent, carrying the weight of more than just her unborn child. When I first saw her, it was like looking into a mirror of my younger self. The pain in her eyes, the quiet she carried like armor. I didn't ask questions. I gave her food, a place to sleep, and space to breathe. For days she said little. I would leave tea outside her door, sit near her when tears came, and simply remain present. One night, she finally asked me why I was kind to her. I didn't give a theological lecture or a carefully crafted answer. I said only, because he was kind to me first. She wept, and I wept with her. As her belly grew, so did her laughter. She began helping in the kitchen, humming softly during our evening gatherings, braiding the hair of the younger girls in the shelter. The other women embraced her. Her child became our child. When she gave birth, we named him Emmanuel, God with us. Holding him in my arms, I cried. Not the loud, desperate tears of loss, but the quiet, reverent tears of resurrection. Not the dramatic kind, but the kind that sneaks into the broken places and makes them bloom again. In that moment, I understood my calling was not to lead from a pedestal, but to walk alongside others in the dirt, the tears, the laughter, and the love of real life. Word began to spread, not as rumors or proclamations, but as whispers carried on the wind. Women began arriving, some with children, others with scars no one could see. The church supported us when they could. Pastor David encouraged me to teach, and I hesitated. Who was I to teach? But he looked at me and said, "You already are." So I began, once a week at first, then twice. We opened the Word together, shared stories, cried, praised. Some weeks we said nothing at all, letting grace speak in the silence. It wasn't formal, but it was holy. It wasn't organized, but it was alive. There was still one wound that hadn't healed, My brother. Daniel hadn't spoken to me since I left. My letters went unanswered, my visits unwelcomed. But one morning I walked to the edge of the village where a great tree cast its shadow on the path. I sat beneath it with my Bible and journal, praying not for his approval, but for his peace. "Jesus, I give him to you," I whispered. "If reconciliation comes, let it be your will. If not, give me peace." I stood to leave with a heavy but surrendered heart. When I returned to the mission, Sister Grace was at the door, her eyes wide. "Someone is asking for you," she said. And there he was, older, thinner, hesitant. We locked eyes and years of silence stretched between us. He didn't say much, only 3 words that broke me open. "I missed you." We didn't debate. We didn't explain. We simply sat at the kitchen table where I had once served strangers. Now we shared the quiet as siblings. He didn't ask about my faith. He didn't embrace it, but he embraced me, and that was enough. In that moment I knew God was not only healing me, he was restoring what I thought was lost forever. Since that day, our little refuge has grown, not in fame or numbers, but in presence, in heart. We still meet under the same worn roof. We still cry together, still read together, still remember that the one who called us doesn't require titles or perfection. He simply says, "Come." People used to call me a goddess. Now I am simply a daughter. I no longer carry the expectations of the crowd. I carry grace, and it is more than enough. If you have ever lived your life performing for acceptance, if you have ever wondered who you are beyond the titles or the wounds, hear me. Jesus sees the real you, and he loves you. I often think back to that little girl who sat by the river at dawn, watching the mist rise with the sun. For so many years, I believed she was gone forever, swallowed by the role I had to play. But now I know she was never truly lost, just waiting for me to stop running. Grace didn't erase her, it restored her. And though the journey here was long and filled with detours, I would walk it again to discover the truth I now hold close. That worth is not earned by the rituals we perform, but received in the relationship we're offered. We've welcomed women from villages I've never visited, women carrying stories I could never have imagined. Some came bruised, others came hardened by survival. All came searching for a place where they didn't have to pretend. Week after week, I've watched their eyes soften, their shoulders relax as they realize they can breathe here. I see myself in them, and I think they see themselves in me. Not as a perfect leader, but as someone who has been broken and still chooses to stand. We don't gather to impress each other. We gather to remind one another that we are not alone. There are still days when the weight of the past tries to settle on my shoulders. Memories of the temple, the bowed heads, the whispered prayers. They visit like ghosts. Sometimes they tempt me to wonder if I abandoned something great, if the loss of status was too high a price. But then, I look at the faces around me, the shared meals, the prayers whispered in simple faith, and I know I didn't lose my purpose. I found it, and it was never meant to be found on a pedestal. It was always waiting here, among the ordinary, where love has room to breathe. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the river caught the last light, I sat outside with my Bible on my lap. I read again the words that had started it all. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I let the truth of it sink deep, remembering the first time those words wrapped around me like a lifeline. I had been weary then, burdened beyond what I could carry, certain that rest was impossible. But now I knew rest wasn't a destination. It was a person. It was him. And he had been waiting for me all along. We've seen lives change here, not because of me, but because of him. I've watched shame dissolve into hope, fear turn into faith. And every time it happens, I'm reminded that the same invitation that rescued me is still open for anyone willing to take it. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to fix yourself before you come. You only have to come as you are. That's how I came, empty-handed, out of strength, and still he called me his. So when people ask me now what I do, I tell them the truth. I walk alongside the weary. I sit with the brokenhearted. I listen to the silent and speak hope into the air around them. I no longer live to be adored. I live to love. And in the quiet moments, when the room is still and the night air drifts through the open window, I whisper the same words I whispered on the day my life began again. Jesus, help me. Not because I am lost, but because I want to remain found. Not because I am empty, but because I never want to forget who fills me. And I hope that whoever hears my story will dare to whisper those same words and discover for themselves the grace that waits on the other side. If my story has touched something in you, if you have ever felt the exhaustion of living behind a mask, the weight of trying to be enough, know this: you don't have to keep carrying it. The same invitation that found me in the darkest corner of my life is extended to you right now. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to clean yourself up first. You don't have to understand everything before you take the first step. You simply have to come. I'm not here to call you into a religion. I'm inviting you into a relationship with the one who sees you exactly as you are and loves you completely. Jesus isn't asking you for your performance. He's offering you his presence. And I can tell you, from the deepest place in my heart, that once you experience it, you'll never be the same. If you're ready to start, even if your voice trembles, whisper those words that changed my life. Jesus, help me. That's where it began for me. In surrender, in honesty, in letting go of the role I thought I had to play. And that's where it can begin for you too. Don't wait until the perfect time. There is no perfect time. There is only now. Take that step toward him today. And if you need a place to walk this journey with others who understand, you've already found one here. This is a community of people who were once lost and have been found. Not because we are perfect, but because we know the one who is. If this story has spoken to you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and follow Jesus. Stay connected so you can hear more stories like this, stories of real lives changed by grace. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because you never know how your courage to share could open a door for them. Leave a comment telling me where you are on your journey. I read every message, and I pray for each person who writes. Your story matters. You matter. And you are not too far gone, too broken, or too late. Every tear you've cried, he has seen. Every silent question you've asked, he has heard. And he is still here, waiting, watching, loving you without conditions. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. You've given me a gift, your attention, your trust, and I pray that what you've heard will grow inside you like a seed, slowly but surely, into peace, purpose, and freedom. Until we meet again, keep seeking, keep hoping, and above all, keep walking toward the one who calls you by name. I'll be here, sharing, praying, and believing with you. We are in this together, always.